A mother in West Darfur awakes before sunrise, not because the day is starting, but because the night never really ended. The air is still, yet the silence feels dangerous. In the distance, there are shapes where houses used to be, and on the road, people move in small groups, carrying whatever they could hold when they ran. This is Sudan, recent Sudan, where a war between two armed powers shattered the country's center and reopened old wounds in its west. What many people now call the genocide in Sudan is not one single moment. It is a chain, a long history of targeted violence in Darfur, then national collapse, then a new war that turns civilians into the front line again. To understand it, we have to follow three threads: how Sudan arrived at war in 2023, why Darfur became the epicenter of some of the worst atrocities, and what the world saw and struggled to stop. In April 2023, fighting erupted between Sudan's national army and a powerful paramilitary force, spreading across Khartoum and turning neighborhoods into battle zones. Water and electricity failed, hospitals ran out of supplies, families hid indoors and began measuring time by gunfire. But while the world focused on the capital, Darfur recognized the danger immediately, because when central authority collapses, the periphery pays first. Darfur had already lived through mass violence beginning in the early 2000s, and by 2023, the war reopened the same landscape with fewer restraints and more weapons. In West Darfur, especially around El Geneina, survivors and investigators described massacres, widespread destruction of homes, and targeted attacks against specific communities, along with looting and forced displacement. People fled toward Chad on foot, carrying children and the elderly, arriving exhausted with almost nothing. Across Sudan, millions were displaced, markets collapsed, and hunger spread as aid convoys struggled to move through armed checkpoints. This is how mass atrocity grows in modern war, not only through killing, but through breaking the systems that keep people alive. Both major fighting forces were accused of serious abuses in different areas, but in Darfur, reports of ethnically targeted attacks and mass expulsions drew particular alarm because the pattern echoed the earlier catastrophe. In 2025, some governments, including the United States, formally stated that acts in Darfur met the legal definition of genocide, while other investigators continued documenting mass atrocities and possible crimes against humanity. Behind these terms are human lives, teenagers who have never known stable peace, parents trying to find medicine while cities become battlefields, and families watching history repeat on the same roads. Even those who escape bullets may face the consequences in overcrowded shelters, delayed aid, disease, and trauma that follow them across borders. Sudan's recent catastrophe did not begin from nowhere. It grew from decades of militarized power, impunity, broken agreements, and armed groups rewarded for violence. When confrontation came in 2023, it spread into places already scarred. The war's outcome remains uncertain. Diplomatic efforts have repeatedly stalled, and civilians remain trapped in a humanitarian crisis. Yet the story is also about survival. Neighbors hiding each other, doctors working with almost nothing, local volunteers rebuilding order out of chaos, refugees crossing borders and still moving forward. The most dangerous thing for any mass atrocity is not being documented. Sudan is complex, but complexity is not an excuse for silence. Picture a road in Darfur at dusk, dust hanging in the air, families walking toward an uncertain border, carrying the last pieces of their lives. Behind them, a home that may never be rebuilt. Ahead of them, a future that depends not only on survival, but on whether the world recognizes what happened, names it honestly, and acts before the next cycle begins.